Okay, it's already getting a little dark here, but I'm going to go ahead and try and record a little bit more. What I did was I cut out my inner sole piece, and I've taken my black fabric, and I'm going to glue that down, and that will be my inner sole for shoe number 2. So that's opposite of what this one is. Before I go there, I wanted to show you a little trick. My friend showed me this on, I think I mentioned it on one of my videos. This is the piece of vinyl that I didn't use. I've got my regular needle on, my regular pressure foot, and I'm going to just go ahead and show you what it's like to sew on this vinyl. It's going through fine. See how nice it's sewing? And it's pushing itself through. That's having the snakeskin on the bottom, and it's sewing just perfectly. I'm having a really nice, I have a really nice seam going here. It's sewed on the front and back just perfect. Okay, so now I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to try and sew on the snakeskin side, the shiny side. So I'm going to put my needle down, and I'm going to try and sew. And look what happens. Nothing's going, because this is too, there's nothing that this thing can grip to get it through the pressure foot. The feed dogs aren't pulling it through. So my other option at this point, if I need to sew on the top here, is to put on my walking foot, which is this, and I will have no trouble sewing it. Or I can take a regular roll of Scotch tape like this, regular tape, take my pressure foot off, take a piece of tape, and I'm going to just put it over the bottom of my pressure foot. And I'm going to punch a hole here where my needle can go in and out. Okay, so I'm going to put it back on my machine. Okay, and now I'm going to try sewing that same thing again with the shiny side up. Before, you noticed I couldn't get anywhere. I was stuck in the same spot. It wouldn't sew. So now I'm going to try it again with just that little piece of Scotch tape on there. So let's try it again. So just that little bit of friction, friction with the Scotch tape on the pressure foot allowed me to sew on the vinyl without having a walking foot. Just that's all there was to it. Just putting a little piece of Scotch tape on there, and you can sew on the vinyl. I haven't tried it yet. Well, let me try it now. I'm going to take a piece of regular vinyl and try it on this one. Okay, so this is regular marine vinyl. Perfect. Sewed right through. So let me take that piece of tape off and try that vinyl again without a walking foot. Without the masking, the Scotch tape. Same piece. Oh, it's sewing anyway. I'll be darned. Okay, well, I guess it doesn't matter either way on the vinyl. Let me try it the opposite way, the shiny side down. Yeah, it's working fine. I'll be darned. Okay. Well, now you know. So on the snakeskin, you need to have the Scotch tape. On the vinyl, you can try it without it and see if you can sew. If you can sew without it, perfect. But if you can't, you're going to have to use either Scotch tape or a walking foot. I've tried this before and it never worked, so this has got me stumped. Let me try it like this. 2 pieces together. Moving on. It worked. Well, not really. It bunched up really bad. Look what happened. It curled on itself really bad. That's without a walking foot. Okay, well, let's try it with the tape. I'm not going to so let's see here. Okay, let me sew these 2 together with the tape. See if it'll curl up. Yeah, it curled up. Could be because I had such a little piece, though, but I don't think so. You're probably still going to have to need the walking foot on the marine vinyl. I wonder why that one worked. Maybe because this vinyl isn't as thick. But anyway, so this will work on the tape. Will work on this. It may work on this just fine too, but it could be because I have such a small sliver of vinyl. But yeah, I think it would work. So it's worth a try if you don't have a walking foot. Okay, so let me go ahead and finish. I'm just going to tape this down, and then we'll start sewing the pieces together, and we'll put this all together. Okay, so the first step to get the shoe put together is to sew the lining. So you have the inner lining and you have the actual piece for the boot. I put that little mark here for the sew line, and it's the same thing on the inner facing, or the facing. It's the straighter curve is okay. So in other words, when you're sewing these together, mark your sewing line so you don't sew the wrong piece on the wrong way. So if this doesn't fit from one side to the other, that means you're sewing it on the wrong side, because if you try and sew it the other way, it'll fit. It won't fit. Your seams won't match up. So the only way I'm going to be able to sew these is if I make that little clip in the center. So I'm going to clip about 1/4 of an inch in. See how I did that? So now I'm going to take this and I'm going to pin here on one side. And then I'm going to take the other side and I'm going to pin it to the opposite side. And I've got to ease that in so I have a straight seam. I kind of explained this in the pink boot video because it's the same situation. But anyway, so take your get your center of your middle piece. It's probably easier if you put a pin in your center before you put them together. You're probably not seeing very much of this because it's such dark fabric. But anyway, there's the center of my toe piece, and I'm going to line that up with my little clip that I made in the center of the boot itself, the boot interfacing piece. Okay, so just put a pin there. So if it's easier for you, you can sew from here to the middle and then turn it over and then sew from here to the middle again if you want to do it that way, if you don't feel like you can sew it straight across. I sew mine where I'm looking at my extra fabric to ease in. I sew this way, but I've been told by others that you put the easing fabric that you need eased in on the bottom and let your pressure foot walk it so it's even. So whatever you feel comfortable with, how you want to sew it is up to you. But either this way or upside down. So I'm just going to sew it the way I'm comfortable with, the way I've always sewn. So I'm going to go ahead and put that seam in here. I'm using a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, and I'm using a regular standard stitch. So I'm easing it in as I'm sewing. So I'm going to take that pin out so I can make sure I don't catch all my fabric in a bundle underneath. The easiest thing to do is just get in there and really look so you can see what you're doing. The nice thing about this part is even if it's not perfect, it doesn't matter because nobody is ever going to look inside to see how well you sewed that. Could you tell? I mean, for what I just sewed, it's on the inside of the shoe and nobody's going to see it. So if it's not perfect, don't worry about it because nobody's going to see it. Okay, so just cut off your edges, and then that's your interfacing. So that's your interfacing for the inside of the boot. So when we sew it to the boot, it's actually going to be this way. You can see how I did get a little bundle there, but it's okay. I'm not going to worry about it. If it was on the outside, I'd probably try and straighten it out more. But like I said, it's on the inside of the boot, so not a big deal. Okay, there's no give in this. So when I try and sew this piece to this piece, it's going to be absolutely impossible for me to make that. The only way I'm going to get these two pieces sewn together on the sewing machine is if I make all my clips before I ever even try and get that sewed together. So the first clip I'm going to make is my middle kit clip. So I'm going to sew that like that. I'm going to 1/4 of an inch in the middle, clip it. Okay, so there's your 1/4 inch. So now I've already drawn in my 1/4 of an inch here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut myself some diamonds. So give yourself some diamond cuts. The reason you're doing this is so that you can actually sew this to the other piece. Without doing this, the chances of you being able to sew it together are nil. You can do it, but you're going to end up stretching your fabric out of shape, and it's not going to work for you. You're going to have to make these little clips. And this way you'll be able to ease it in as you're sewing it. That's why it's a good idea to draw your sewing line in, so you know exactly where to make your clips. Okay, one more. Okay, so now we've got all our clips made, so now I'm going to be able to sew this to this piece. So I'm going to line up my seam, and I'm going to put a pin in here, but when I put my pin in, I'm going to do it within that 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, so I don't have any holes in the snakeskin that'll show when I'm done. So there's the one side, and here is the other. One lady gave me she works with vinyl, I guess, and she said that if you do end up with holes in your vinyl, take a steam iron, and you can actually steam iron your the holes out of your vinyl. So I've got that middle line there, so I know I'm not going to put a pin in there because I don't want holes that aren't being able to be covered by the sewing. So I'm just going to put a pin here. Okay. So there is. Do you see what I'm having to do now? Now I'm going to be able to press this down, and I'm going to be able to make a seam here. I'm going to have to work that in, and the only way I'm going to be able to work that in is if I had those clips put in now, because it would have been impossible otherwise. So I'm going to sew from here to here. And because I'm not sewing with the shiny side, I'm sewing vinyl back to vinyl back. I'm using my regular pressure foot, regular needle. Same thing, 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so take your time with this part because you really got to work that. You really have to work that seam in. See how I've got a bundle here? I'm going to take that and move it out of the way until I can get to a specific point, and then I'm going to take it and I'm going to push it in and put it the other way. It's kind of hard to explain until you actually do this yourself and you can see what you're doing. So I'm going to move this up a little bit so I can ease it in. So take your time. And if you just take your finger and you press that vinyl down on top of each other, it will give you a nice connection. So what I'm doing right now is I'm sewing this to this seam right here, not the top stitching, just, can you see that? I'm sewing this to this seam. Okay, so I'm about halfway through now, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift my pressure foot up, and I'm going to see where I'm at on the bottom here. Okay, so there's my middle cut. I'm going to do a couple more stitches here. Uh-oh, what happened? I lost my... Okay. I'm going to back stitch. My machine jammed up on me. Yeah, it certainly did. Okay, well, shoot. Let me clean my machine out and then see what happened here. Okay, well, I got half of it done. Okay, let me fix my machine and I'll turn it back on when I get it fixed.